The research vessel Starbound hung in space like a metal bird, its engines quiet as it moved into orbit around the green and purple planet below. Dr. Jake Harrison pressed his face against the observation window, watching the world spin slowly beneath him. After 3 years of space travel, he was finally here. Xerion 7, home to the first intelligent alien species humanity had ever found. Jake wiped his sweaty palms on his lab coat. As the ship's xenobiologist, his job was to study the planet's life forms. But this was different from studying animals or plants. These aliens could think, talk, and feel just like humans. The thought both excited and scared him. Beautiful, isn't it? Captain Lisa Morgan stood beside him, her reflection visible in the glass. She had been in charge of this mission from the start, and Jake trusted her completely. Lisa was smart, calm, and always knew what to do. "I can't believe we're really here," Jake said. 3 years ago, we didn't even know aliens existed. Now we're about to meet them face to face. Lisa smiled. "The Velkari have been waiting for us. Their messages seemed friendly enough. But remember, Jake, we have to be very careful. One wrong move could ruin everything." Jake nodded. He had read all the reports. The Velkari were a reptilian species that looked somewhat like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs. They had green and silver scales, large yellow eyes, and were about 7 feet tall. Their society was organized and peaceful, but they had very strict rules about many things. The ship's communication system crackled to life. "Captain Morgan, we're getting a transmission from the planet's surface," said Kate Sullivan from the bridge. Kate was their communications officer, and she had been working hard to learn the Velkari language. "Put it through," Lisa said. A deep, rumbling voice filled the observation deck. Even through the translation device, Jake could hear the power and dignity in the alien's words. "Welcome, humans of Earth. I am High Matriarch Zephyra, leader of the Xerion 7 colony. We are honored by your visit and look forward to learning about your species." Lisa picked up the communication device. "Thank you, High Matriarch. We come in peace and friendship. We hope to learn from each other and build a lasting relationship between our peoples." "Your words bring us joy," Zephyra replied. "We have prepared a landing site for your shuttle. However, there are important rules you must follow during your stay. Our young ones, whom we call sparklings, are sacred to our people. No outsider may approach them or interact with them in any way. This law has protected our children for 1,000 years, and it must not be broken." Jake felt a little disappointed. As a biologist, he was naturally curious about young alien life forms, but he understood the importance of respecting their customs. "We will honor your laws," Lisa said into the device. "Good. We will meet you at the landing site in 2 hours. Welcome to Xerion 7. The transmission ended, and Jake began gathering his equipment. His scanner could analyze biological samples from a distance, and his portable lab would let him study anything interesting he found. Dr. Sam Rodriguez, the ship's medical officer, was packing similar equipment nearby. "Nervous?" Sam asked. He was a calm man who always seemed to know what people were thinking. "A little," Jake admitted. "What if I accidentally break one of their rules? What if I say the wrong thing?" "Just be yourself," Sam said. "You're curious about life, and that's a good thing. The Velkari seem to understand that we're different from them. They'll probably expect us to make small mistakes." 2 hours later, Jake stood in the shuttle bay with the rest of the landing team. Besides himself, Lisa, and Sam, there was also Dr. Amy Foster, their psychologist, and Commander Ben Torres, who was in charge of security. Ben was big and strong, but he was also gentle and smart. Lisa had chosen him because he was good at making people feel safe. The shuttle ride to the planet's surface was smooth. Jake watched through the window as they descended through purple clouds toward a landscape of silver trees and blue grass. Strange flying creatures with rainbow wings moved through the air like living jewels. The landing site was a flat area of smooth stone, surrounded by tall, crystal-like structures. As the shuttle touched down, Jake could see the Velkari waiting for them. Even through the shuttle window, they looked impressive. Their scales caught the light from Zerion 7's twin suns, making them seem to glow. High Matriarch Zephyra was easy to identify. She was taller than the others, and her scales were more silver than green. Around her neck, she wore a necklace of glowing stones that pulsed with soft light. When she moved, she did so with grace and power like a queen. "Remember," Lisa said as they prepared to leave the shuttle, "let me do most of the talking. Be polite, be respectful, and don't touch anything unless they say it's okay." The shuttle door opened, and Jake stepped onto an alien world for the first time. The air was warm and smelled like flowers and metal. The ground beneath his feet felt solid but somehow springy, as if it were alive. Zephyra approached them, her large yellow eyes studying each human carefully. When she spoke, the translation device made her words clear, but Jake could still hear the alien sounds underneath. "Humans of Earth," she said, "you are welcome on Zerion 7. I am Zephyra, and these are members of my council." She gestured to the other Velkari, who bowed their heads slightly. Lisa stepped forward and bowed in return. "Thank you for your hospitality, High Matriarch. I am Captain Lisa Morgan, and these are my team members." As Lisa introduced each person, Jake noticed that the Velkari were studying them with intense curiosity. Their eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of human appearance and behavior. He realized that they were probably just as nervous and excited as he was. "We have prepared quarters for you in our settlement," Zephyra said. "Tomorrow, we will begin formal cultural exchanges. But tonight, you must rest. The journey between stars is long, and you will need your strength." As they walked toward the Velkari settlement, Jake caught glimpses of movement in the crystal structures. Quick, small shapes darted between the buildings, too fast for him to see clearly. He wondered if those were the sparklings he had been warned about. The thought made him more curious than ever. Jake woke up early on his third day on Zerion 7. The Velkari had given the human team comfortable quarters in a building made of the same crystal-like material as the rest of their settlement. Through his window, he could see the alien city coming to life as the twin suns rose over the horizon. The past 2 days had been filled with formal meetings and cultural exchanges. Jake had learned that the Velkari were peaceful people who valued knowledge and tradition above all else. They had shown the humans their art, their technology, and their history. In return, the humans had shared stories about Earth and human civilization. But Jake was getting restless. As a scientist, he wanted to explore and study the planet's ecosystem. So far, he had only been allowed to examine a few plant samples that the Velkari had brought to him. He needed to see the living world for himself. After breakfast, Jake approached Captain Lisa with a request. "I'd like to take a walk around the settlement today," he said. "Just to observe the local wildlife. I promise I'll stay away from any restricted areas." Lisa considered this for a moment. "Take Sam with you," she said finally. "And don't go too far from the settlement. We're still guests here. and I don't want any problems. Jake agreed. And soon he and Sam were walking through the outskirts of the Velkari city. The alien architecture was beautiful but strange. The buildings seemed to grow from the ground like plants, with smooth, flowing lines and surfaces that changed color depending on the angle of the light. As they walked, Jake used his scanner to study the local plant life. The bluegrass was actually a type of fungus that formed a network underneath the ground. The silver trees were not trees at all, but enormous flowering plants that could live for thousands of years. Everything was connected to everything else, in ways that Jake was only beginning to understand. "This is incredible," Jake told Sam as he knelt beside a patch of purple flowers that seemed to glow with their own light. "The whole ecosystem is like one giant organism. Each part supports the others." Sam was more interested in the security aspects of their situation. "The Velkari seem friendly enough," he said, "but I notice they always keep at least 2 guards nearby when we're outside. They're watching us pretty carefully." Jake looked around and saw that Sam was right. 2 Velkari in simple brown clothing were following them at a distance, trying to look casual but obviously keeping an eye on the humans. As they continued their walk, Jake heard a sound that made him stop. It was a soft, chittering noise, like the sound a bird might make, but more complex. The sound seemed to come from ahead of them, where a low wall separated the main settlement from a garden area. "What was that?" Sam asked. Jake moved toward the sound, his curiosity overriding his caution. As he approached the wall, he could see movement on the other side. Small, quick shapes were darting between colorful plants and crystal formations. "I think those are the sparklings," Jake whispered. Sam looked nervous. "Jake, we were told to stay away from them. Remember what the High Matriarch said," but Jake couldn't help himself. He had to see these young aliens, even if it was just from a distance. He carefully looked over the wall, making sure not to make any sudden movements. What he saw took his breath away. The sparklings were about the size of house cats, but they moved with an intelligence and purpose that no Earth animal possessed. Their scales were brighter and more colorful than those of adult Velkari, shifting through shades of blue, green, and silver like living rainbows. Their eyes were larger in proportion to their heads, and they seemed to glow with curiosity and awareness. There were about a dozen of them in the garden, and they were doing something that looked almost like playing games. One group was building a tower out of small stones, working together to place each piece carefully. Another group seemed to be solving a puzzle made of colored crystals, moving the pieces around until they formed a pattern. But what amazed Jake the most was how they moved. The sparklings didn't just run around randomly like young animals. They seemed to communicate with each other through gestures and soft, chirping sounds. They took turns, shared materials, and helped each other with their tasks. "They're so intelligent," Jake breathed. "Look at how they cooperate. They're using tools and solving problems together." Sam pulled at Jake's sleeve. "We need to go. The guards are getting nervous." Jake was about to turn away when something unexpected happened. His scanner, which was hanging from his belt, somehow came loose and fell over the wall into the sparkling garden. "Oh no," Jake said. The scanner was an expensive piece of equipment, and he needed it for his research, but more importantly, he didn't want to disturb the young aliens. The sparklings had noticed the scanner immediately. They gathered around it, chittering excitedly and examining it from all angles. Jake expected them to be afraid or to call for adult supervision. Instead, they seemed fascinated by the device. One of the sparklings, slightly larger than the others and with particularly bright silver scales, approached the scanner carefully. It used its small hands to pick up the device, turning it over and studying its surface. Then it looked directly at Jake. For a moment, human and alien stared at each other across the wall. Jake felt a strange sensation, as if the sparkling was looking not just at him, but into him. The young alien's eyes seemed to understand something that went beyond words. The sparkling made a soft chirping sound, and the others gathered around it. Working together, they carried the scanner to the wall and somehow managed to lift it high enough for Jake to reach. "Thank you," Jake whispered as he took back his equipment. He felt foolish talking to aliens who probably couldn't understand him, but it seemed like the right thing to do. The sparklings chittered softly in response, almost as if they were saying, "You're welcome." "Dr. Harrison!" a deep voice called from behind him. Jake turned to see Elder Corvin, one of the most serious members of the Velkari Council, approaching with several guards. Corvin's scales were darker than most, and his yellow eyes seemed to burn with disapproval. "Elder Corvin," Jake said, trying to sound casual, "I was just observing the local ecosystem." "You were interacting with our sparklings," Corvin said coldly. "This is forbidden. You have no idea what damage your alien influence might cause to their development." "I wasn't trying to interact with them," Jake protested. "I accidentally dropped my scanner, and they helped me get it back. They were just being helpful." Corvin's expression grew even more severe. "Sparklings do not help outsiders. They are taught from birth to avoid contact with anyone outside their family group. What you describe is impossible." But even as Corvin spoke, Jake could see the sparklings watching from the other side of the wall. The silver-scaled one that had helped him was still looking at Jake with those intelligent, understanding eyes. "Perhaps there was a misunderstanding," Sam said diplomatically. "Dr. Harrison meant no harm." Corvin stared at Jake for a long moment. "Human, you will stay away from the sparkling areas from now on. Any further contact with our young ones will result in your immediate removal from this planet. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir," Jake said reluctantly, as they walked back toward their quarters. Jake couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The sparklings had shown kindness and intelligence that impressed him more than anything else he had seen on Zerion 7. But he had also seen the fear in Elder Corvin's eyes. What were the Velkari so afraid of? And why did that one sparkling seem to understand him so well? That night, Jake lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to get the image of those bright, intelligent eyes out of his mind. The great ceremony hall of the Velkari was filled with soft, musical sounds and the gentle glow of crystal formations. Jake sat with the other humans on cushioned platforms, watching as the aliens performed what they called the Dance of Seasons. It was their way of celebrating the changing of their planet's weather patterns, and it was beautiful beyond anything Jake had ever seen. Adult Velkari moved in flowing patterns across the polished floor, their scales catching and reflecting the light from overhead crystals. They sang in harmonious voices that seemed to make the very air vibrate with melody. The translation devices couldn't capture the full meaning of their songs, but Jake could feel the emotions behind them: joy, reverence, and a deep connection to their world. High Matriarch Zephyra had invited the humans to observe this sacred ceremony as a sign of trust and friendship. "You are the first outsiders ever to witness the Dance of Seasons," she had told them earlier. "This is a great honor for your people." Jake was trying to focus on the ceremony, but he kept glancing toward the edges of the hall where he had noticed small movements. The sparklings were there, he was sure of it. Young Velkari were apparently allowed to watch important ceremonies. but they had to stay in designated areas away from the adults. As the dance continued, Jake found himself thinking about what had happened 3 days ago in the garden. He had tried to put the incident out of his mind, but he couldn't forget the way that silver-scaled sparkling had looked at him. There had been something almost human about its expression. Curiosity, understanding, and maybe even friendship. Elder. Corvin was among the dancers, his dark scales making him stand out from the others. Every time he spun past the human observers, his yellow eyes seemed to focus on Jake with disapproval. Jake tried to ignore him and concentrate on the beauty of the ceremony. The dance was reaching its climax when something unexpected happened. 3 small figures suddenly broke away from the sparkling viewing area and ran toward the center of the hall. The adult dancers stopped in surprise as the young aliens darted between them, heading straight for the human seating area. "What are they doing?" Amy Foster whispered. As the team's psychologist, she had been studying Velkari behavior, and this was clearly not normal. The 3 sparklings, Jake recognized the silver-scaled one from the garden, along with 2 others, reached the human platform and immediately climbed up onto it. Before anyone could react, they had settled themselves around Jake, the silver one perching on his shoulder while the other 2 curled up against his sides. The ceremony hall fell completely silent. Every adult Velkari was staring at the humans, with expressions of shock and horror. High Matriarch Zephyra looked as if she had seen something impossible. "Jake," Lisa whispered urgently, "don't move. Don't do anything to startle them." Jake sat perfectly still as the 3 sparklings made themselves comfortable around him. They were chittering softly to each other in voices too quiet for the translation, devices to pick up. The one on his shoulder, Jake found himself thinking of it as Pip because of its small size, nuzzled against his neck with what felt like affection. "This cannot be happening." Elder Corvin's voice cut through the silence, like a blade. He strode toward the human platform, his scales darkened with anger. Sparklings do not choose outsiders. They do not even approach adults outside their family groups until they reach maturity. "But they did choose," Jake said softly, trying not to disturb the young aliens. "I didn't call them or do anything to attract them. They came to me on their own." Zephyra approached more slowly, her expression a mixture of amazement and concern. "In all our recorded history, sparklings have never behaved this way. They are taught from birth to be cautious around strangers, especially aliens." The sparkling Jake thought of as Zara, she had distinctive blue-green scales with golden spots, looked up at the High Matriarch and made a series of soft, chirping sounds. The translation device struggled with the high-pitched alien speech, producing only broken fragments, friend, safe, understands. "What did she say?" Jake asked. "The translation is unclear," Zephyra admitted. "Sparkling speech is different from adult language. It changes as they grow older." Elder Corvin stepped closer, his large hands clenched into fists. "This human has corrupted our young with some alien influence. They must be separated immediately, and the sparklings must be examined for contamination." "No," Jake said firmly. The word came out louder than he intended, and the sparklings pressed closer to him as if seeking protection. "I haven't done anything to them. Look at them. Do they seem scared or hurt? They're happy." It was true. The 3 young aliens were purring. There was no other word for the soft, rumbling sounds they were making. The 3rd sparkling, who had scales that seemed to shimmer like starlight, was actually playing with the buttons on Jake's shirt. Jake decided to call this one Nova, because of the way its scales caught the light. They refused to leave, observed Thex, a young Velkari scientist who had been studying the interaction with obvious fascination. Unlike the older council members, Thex seemed more curious than alarmed. Look, even when Elder Corvin approaches, they move closer to the human. This is an abomination, Corvin declared. Sparklings are sacred. They must be protected from outside influences that could damage their proper development. But what if this isn't damage? Thex suggested carefully. What if this is something new? Something we don't understand yet? Zephyra held up a hand for silence. The ceremony is over. Everyone will return to their homes. The council will meet in emergency session to discuss this situation. As the Velkari began to leave the hall, Jake noticed that many of them were whispering among themselves, and looking back at him with mixtures of fear, curiosity, and amazement. Some seemed angry, but others appeared thoughtful. "We need to get you back to your quarters," Lisa said quietly. "This has become a diplomatic incident." "What about them?" Jake asked, looking down at the three sparklings. They showed no signs of wanting to leave him. Commander Ben Torres had been watching the situation with growing concern. "The Velkari authorities will want to separate you from them. This could be a problem for the entire mission." As if they understood what was being discussed, the sparklings pressed even closer to Jake. Pip made a distressed chirping sound while Zara and Nova wrapped their small arms around Jake's waist. "I don't think they want to be separated from me," Jake said, "and honestly, I don't want to be separated from them either. There's something special about this. I can feel it." "Feel what?" Amy asked with professional interest. Jake struggled to put the sensation into words. "It's like they understand me. Not just my words, but my thoughts, my feelings. When I look at them, I feel calm and happy, and I think they feel the same way." Dr. Sam Rodriguez approached cautiously and began scanning the sparklings with his medical equipment. "Their vital signs are all normal," he reported. "If anything, they seem healthier and more active than the baseline readings we took of other young Velkari." "This is unprecedented," Zephyra said, her voice filled with uncertainty. "We must study this phenomenon carefully, but until we understand what has happened, the human must be isolated from all sparklings." "No!" The word came from Pip, translated clearly by the device. The small alien's voice was high and musical, but the emotion behind it was unmistakable. "Stay with friend Jake. Safe with friend Jake." Everyone stared at the sparkling in amazement. Young Velkari typically didn't speak clearly enough for translation. Devices to understand until they were much older. "Did that sparkling just speak your name?" Lisa asked Jake in disbelief. I never told them my name," Jake said, equally amazed. "How could they know?" Elder Corvin's expression had gone from anger to something approaching fear. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. The human is changing them, corrupting their natural development. They must be separated immediately." But as guards approached to take the sparklings away, all three young aliens began making loud, distressed calls. Other sparklings throughout the settlement responded with similar cries, creating a chorus of alien voices that filled the air with sounds of fear and confusion. "Stop!" Zephyra commanded. "We are frightening all the young ones. This requires more careful consideration." As the guards stepped back, the three sparklings quieted down, but they remained firmly attached to Jake. Pip looked up at him with those large, intelligent eyes and made a soft sound that the translator rendered as, "Chose you." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. Whatever was happening here, it was bigger than anyone had expected. And somehow, 3 alien children had decided that he was the one they trusted above all others. The question was, what would the adult Velkari do about it? The council chamber was the most impressive building Jake had seen on Xerion 7. Its walls were made of a dark crystal that seemed to absorb light, creating an atmosphere of serious importance. 12 adult Velkari sat in a semicircle on raised platforms, their scales gleaming in the soft illumination from overhead fixtures. At the center sat High Matriarch Zephyra, her expression grave and thoughtful. Jake stood in the middle of the chamber, feeling very small and human. Captain Lisa and Commander Ben Torres flanked him, while Dr. Amy Foster sat nearby with her recording equipment. The 3 sparklings, Pip, Zara, and Nova, had been separated from Jake for the trial, but he could hear their distressed calls echoing from somewhere else in the building. Dr. Jake Harrison of Earth, Zephyra began formally, you stand accused of using unknown human abilities to manipulate and corrupt 3 of our sacred sparklings. How do you answer this charge? I'm not guilty, Jake said clearly. I never used any abilities on them because I don't have any special abilities. I'm just a normal human scientist. The sparklings came to me on their own. Elder Corvin leaned forward, his dark scales seeming to grow even darker. Sparklings do not approach outsiders. This is a fundamental truth of their nature. The only way this could happen is if you influenced them with alien methods we do not understand. With respect, Elder Corvin, Jake replied. Maybe the fundamental truth you believe isn't actually true. Maybe there's something about sparklings that your people don't understand. A murmur of shocked voices rippled through the chamber. Questioning Velkari wisdom about their own young was clearly considered very rude. Jake, Lisa whispered urgently, be more diplomatic. But before Jake could apologize, a new voice spoke up. The human may have a point. It was Thex, the young Velkari scientist. Although he was the newest member of the council, his research credentials had earned him a place among the elders. We have always assumed that sparkling behavior follows certain patterns, but we have never tested those assumptions scientifically. Are you suggesting that our ancestors were wrong about the nature of our own children? Another council member asked coldly. I'm suggesting that maybe there are things about sparklings that we never had the opportunity to discover, Thex replied, calmly. Until now, they have only interacted with other Velkari. This human represents the first outside perspective they have ever encountered. Elder Corvin stood up, his full 7-foot height making him tower over everyone else in the chamber. This kind of thinking is dangerous. Our traditions have protected the sparklings for 1,000 years. We will not risk their safety for the sake of scientific curiosity. But what if keeping them isolated is actually harmful? Jake asked. What if sparklings need to interact with different kinds of minds in order to develop properly? The chamber fell silent. Jake could see that some of the council members were considering his words, while others looked angry at the suggestion. Dr. Amy Foster cleared her throat. If I may speak, she said, I've been observing the 3 sparklings who bonded with Dr. Harrison. From a psychological perspective, they appear to be thriving. Their behavior is more complex and their vocalizations more advanced than what we've observed in other young Velkari. You've had very limited observation time, Corvin pointed out. How can you make such claims? Because, Amy continued, Dr. Rodriguez and I have been monitoring them continuously since the bonding occurred. Their brain activity is significantly higher than baseline measurements. They're learning and developing at an accelerated rate. That moment, a commotion outside the chamber interrupted the proceedings. The voices of distressed sparklings grew louder, and Jake could hear Velkari caretakers trying to calm them down. "What is happening out there?" Zephyra demanded. A guard entered the chamber and bowed respectfully. "High Matriarch, the sparklings throughout the settlement are becoming agitated. They refuse to eat or engage in normal activities. The three who bonded with the human are particularly distressed." Jake felt his heart sink. "It's because they're separated from me," he said. "They're scared and confused. Or they're suffering withdrawal from whatever influence you placed on them," Corvin suggested darkly. "There's only one way to find out," Thex said. He had been taking notes throughout the trial, and now he looked up with excitement. "We could conduct a controlled experiment, allow the human to interact with the sparklings under careful observation. If he is truly manipulating them, we will be able to detect it." "Absolutely not," Corvin declared. "We will not risk further contamination." But Zephyra was looking thoughtful. "What kind of experiment?" she asked. Thex pulled out a small device. That looked like a crystal tablet. "We have puzzles and tests that we use to measure sparkling development. If the three who bonded with the human perform significantly better when he is present, it would suggest that the interaction is beneficial rather than harmful." "And if they perform worse?" another council member asked. "Then we will know that the human's influence is indeed corrupting them," Thex admitted. Jake looked around the chamber at the assembled Velkari. Some seemed convinced that he was dangerous, while others appeared curious about Thex's proposal. The decision would ultimately rest with High Matriarch Zephyra. "I want to help," Jake said quietly. "I care about Pip, Zara, and Nova. If my presence is hurting them, I'll stay away. But if I can help them develop and learn, doesn't that benefit everyone?" Zephyra was quiet for a long moment, her large yellow eyes studying Jake's face. "You speak of these sparklings as if they are individuals with names," she observed. "Because they are individuals," Jake replied. "Pip is curious and brave. Zara is gentle and thoughtful. Nova is playful and clever. They're not just generic young aliens. They're unique personalities with their own thoughts and feelings. Sparklings do not develop individual personalities until they reach adolescence," Corvin stated flatly. "Maybe they do, and you just never noticed," Jake suggested. "Maybe because adult Velkari are taught not to interact with them closely, you never had the chance to see their individual traits." The distressed calls from outside were getting louder. Jake could distinctly hear Pip's voice among them, high and desperate. The sound made his chest ache with sympathy. "High Matriarch," a different guard reported, entering the chamber hurriedly. "The sparklings are refusing all food and comfort. The caretakers are concerned about their health." Zephyra closed her eyes and seemed to be thinking deeply. When she opened them again, Jake could see that she had made a decision. "We will conduct Thex's experiment," she announced. "Under strict supervision, the human will be allowed to interact with the three sparklings while we observe their behavior and measure their responses." "This is a mistake," Corvin warned. "We are putting our most precious young ones at risk for the sake of alien curiosity." "We are seeking the truth," Zephyra corrected. "If the human is truly harmful to the sparklings, we will discover it and act accordingly. If he is beneficial, then we must reconsider our understanding of sparkling development." Jake felt a mix of relief and nervousness. "When do we start?" he asked. "Now," Zephyra said, standing up. "The sparklings are already distressed. The sooner we determine the truth, the better for everyone involved." As they prepared to leave the council chamber, Jake heard Pip's voice calling out again. This time, the translation device clearly picked up the words, Want friend Jake? Need friend Jake? The sound made several council members pause and look at each other uncertainly. Jake realized that this was probably the first time many of them had heard a sparkling express such a clear emotional need. "They're calling for me," Jake said softly. "How can that be manipulation? They're scared, and they want comfort from someone they trust." Even Elder Corvin seemed shaken by the obvious distress in the young alien's voice, but he still maintained his stern expression as the group moved toward the testing chamber. Jake took a deep breath and prepared to prove that his connection with the Sparklings was real, beneficial, and based on genuine affection rather than alien manipulation. The future of human-Velkari relations might depend on what happened next. The testing chamber was filled with scientific equipment that Jake didn't recognize. Velkari computers hummed quietly along the walls, their crystal screens displaying streams of data in alien symbols. Dr. Sam Rodriguez had been allowed to bring his own medical scanners, and he was busy setting them up alongside the Velkari devices. Jake stood in the center of the room, waiting nervously. Through a transparent wall, he could see Pip, Zara, and Nova in a separate chamber. The three Sparklings were huddled together, their normally bright scales looking dull and lifeless. They had refused all food and comfort since being separated from Jake 12 hours ago. "The testing will begin shortly," Thex announced, checking his instruments. "We will monitor brain activity, stress hormones, and learning capacity in both isolated and interactive conditions." High Matriarch Zephyra watched from an observation area above the chamber. Elder Corvin stood beside her, his expression showing that he still believed this experiment was a mistake. Several other council members were present, along with Captain Lisa and Dr. Amy Foster. "First, we will observe the Sparkling's baseline behavior while isolated," Thex explained. He activated a device that projected holographic puzzles into the Sparkling's chamber. The puzzles were simple at first, colored shapes that needed to be arranged in patterns, or crystals that had to be sorted by size. The three young aliens looked at the puzzles, but showed no interest in solving them. Pip chirped weakly, while Zara and Nova simply curled up together and closed their eyes. Their lack of engagement was obvious to everyone watching. "This is normal behavior for distressed Sparklings," one of the Velkari caretakers explained. "When they are unhappy, they refuse to participate in activities." "Now we will introduce the human," Thex said. He opened the barrier between the chambers. The change was immediate and dramatic. All three Sparklings leaped to their feet and rushed toward Jake, their scales suddenly brightening with excitement. They climbed on him, chittering happily and nuzzling against him with obvious affection. "Friend Jake!" Pip exclaimed, its voice clear and joyful. "Missed you! Scared without you!" Jake felt tears in his eyes as he gently petted the small aliens. "I missed you too," he said softly. "I'm here now. Everything's going to be okay." The scanners around the room immediately began registering changes. Sam Rodriguez watched his medical equipment with amazement. "Their stress hormones just dropped to almost nothing," he reported. "Heart rates are normalizing, and brain activity is increasing rapidly. Now let's see how they perform on the puzzles," Thex said, activating the holographic challenges again. With Jake present, the Sparkling's behavior was completely different. They approached the puzzles eagerly, working together to solve each challenge. But more than that, they were solving them faster and more creatively than any young Velkari on record. "Look at this," Thex said excitedly, pointing to his screens. "They're using strategies that we don't typically see until adolescence. They're planning multiple steps ahead and communicating complex ideas to each other." As Jake watched, Zara figured out a particularly difficult pattern puzzle and then taught the solution to Pip and Nova through a series of chirps and gestures. The teamwork was remarkable. It's not just that they're smarter when I'm here, Jake realized aloud. They're teaching each other. They're sharing knowledge in ways that go beyond normal communication. Sam's scanners were picking up something even more interesting. Jake, I'm detecting unusual neural activity in your brain when you're near them. There's a resonance pattern I've never seen before. What kind of resonance? Amy asked, leaning forward with professional interest. It's like your brain waves are synchronizing with theirs, Sam explained, but it's not just mimicking their patterns. You're creating something new together. Thex was studying his own readings with growing excitement. The sparklings are exhibiting neural frequencies that we've never recorded in young Velkari. These patterns are typically associated with advanced telepathic abilities. Telepathic abilities? Jake asked in surprise. You mean they can read minds? Not exactly, Thex said, but they appear to be sharing thoughts and emotions at a level much deeper than normal communication. And somehow your human brain is participating in this process. Elder Corvin had been watching from above, and now his voice came through the communication system with obvious concern. Are you saying that this human has given our sparklings unnatural mental abilities? I don't think I gave them anything, Jake said, watching as Nova solved a puzzle that was supposedly designed for adult-level intelligence. I think these abilities were already there, waiting to be awakened. That's impossible, one of the Velkari caretakers stated. Sparklings are born with basic intelligence that develops slowly over time. They don't have advanced mental capabilities. But as they watched, Pip did something that made everyone in the chamber fall silent. The small sparkling approached one of Thex's computers and began manipulating the holographic interface with its tiny hands. Within moments, it had accessed a database of sparkling developmental records and was displaying the information in ways that revealed patterns the adult Velkari had never noticed. How did it learn to use our computer systems? Thex asked in amazement. I think it learned by watching you, Jake said. But more than that, I think it understood what you were trying to accomplish and decided to help. Zara and Nova had joined Pip at the computer, and together they were creating a new type of data analysis that combined visual patterns with mathematical relationships in ways that were far beyond what anyone expected from young aliens. This is unprecedented, Zafira's voice came from the observation area. In all our history, we have no records of sparklings displaying such advanced capabilities. Sam's medical scanners were picking up even more unusual readings. Jake, I think I know what's happening. The sparklings are naturally telepathic, but adult Velkari brains automatically suppress those abilities. Your human brain doesn't have those natural suppression mechanisms. So by being near them, I'm allowing them to use abilities they were born with? Jake asked. More than that, Amy said, studying the psychological data. I think you're amplifying their abilities. Your emotional openness and lack of mental barriers is creating an environment where they can develop in ways that wouldn't normally be possible. The three sparklings had finished their computer work and were now approaching Jake with something that looked like excitement mixed with urgency. Pip climbed onto his shoulder and pressed its small head against his temple. Suddenly, Jake's mind was filled with images and sensations that weren't his own. He saw the Velkari settlement from a sparkling's perspective, felt their confusion and fear when separated from him, and experienced their joy at being reunited. But underneath all of that, he sensed something else. vast potential waiting to be unlocked, intelligence that had been held back by artificial limitations. "I can feel what they feel," Jake said in wonder. "Not just emotions, but thoughts and ideas. They're trying to show me something important." The images in his mind shifted, showing him ancient Velkari history that he somehow understood despite never having learned it. He saw a time when young Velkari were much more advanced, when they could communicate across vast distances and solve problems that challenged even adult minds. "They're showing me the past," Jake reported to the others. "A time when sparklings had abilities that were later lost or suppressed." Thex was frantically recording everything, his excitement obvious. "This could revolutionize our understanding of sparkling development if these abilities are natural but have been suppressed by our traditional rearing methods. Then we have been limiting our own children for generations," Zephyra finished quietly. Elder Corvin's voice was tight with emotion when he spoke. "Even if this is true, we cannot simply abandon 1,000 years of tradition. There must have been reasons why these abilities were suppressed." But as Jake continued to share the mental connection with Pip, Zara, and Nova, he sensed something that made his heart race with excitement and concern. The sparklings weren't just showing him the past, they were warning him about the future. Something was coming. Something that would require all their abilities working together to survive. And somehow, the fate of both humans and Velkari might depend on what happened next. Jake spent the next 3 days working closely with Thex and Kate Sullivan, the communications officer, to understand what the sparklings had shown him. The images from their shared mental connection were still vivid in his mind, but translating alien memories into human concepts was challenging work. They had set up a research station in the settlement's main library, surrounded by ancient Velkari texts and historical records. The sparklings, Pip, Zara, and Nova, were allowed to stay with Jake during the research, and their presence seemed to help him access the strange knowledge they had shared. "According to these old records," Kate said, looking up from a translation device, "the ancient Velkari did have something they called mind speakers, but the texts are vague about what that actually meant." Thex pulled out a crystalline data storage device that looked older than anything Jake had seen on Xerion 7. "This contains records from before the Great Suppression," he explained. "Most Velkari don't even know it exists. The Council keeps it, hidden because the information is considered too dangerous." "What kind of dangerous?" Jake asked, while Pip perched on his shoulder and Zara and Nova played with his equipment. "The records speak of a war," Thex said quietly. "A conflict between the Velkari and another species called the Jekti. The Jekti were powerful telepaths who could control minds across vast distances. They nearly destroyed our civilization." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What happened to them?" "They were defeated, but barely," Thex continued. "The Velkari who fought them were also telepaths, the mind speakers. After the war ended, the survivors made a decision that changed our entire society." Kate leaned forward with interest. "What kind of decision?" "They chose to suppress the telepathic abilities in future generations," Thex explained. "They believed that such powers were too dangerous to exist, so they changed how sparklings were raised, creating barriers that would prevent the telepathic abilities from developing." But the abilities didn't disappear completely, Jake realized, looking at the 3 sparklings. "They just went dormant." "Exactly," Thex said. "And somehow your human mind is able to bypass the suppression mechanisms and awaken those dormant abilities." Pip chittered softly and touched Jake's face with one small hand. Immediately, more images flowed into his mind. He saw the ancient Velkari mind speakers working together to solve problems, heal diseases, and create technologies that seemed almost magical. But he also saw the terror of the war with the Jekti and the devastation that telepathic warfare had caused. "They're showing me both sides," Jake said. "The benefits and the dangers of telepathic abilities. The ancient Velkari weren't just powerful, they were wise. They used their abilities to help others, not to dominate them. But the fear of another war led them to give up those abilities entirely," Kate observed. "They chose safety over potential." Thex activated the ancient data device, and holographic images filled the air around them. Jake saw recordings of ancient Velkari cities, far more advanced than the current settlement. The mind speakers had been able to coordinate massive construction, projects through shared thoughts, heal injuries by transferring life energy, and even predict natural disasters before they occurred. "This is incredible," Jake breathed. "Your ancestors were amazing. And yet they chose to limit their descendants to prevent the abilities from being misused," Thex said sadly. "For 1,000 years, we have been living as shadows of what we once were." Nova suddenly became very excited, chirping rapidly and pointing at one of the holographic images. It showed a group of ancient Velkari working alongside creatures that Jake didn't recognize. Tall, graceful beings with features that seemed to combine aspects of several different species. "What are those?" Jake asked. Thex studied the image carefully. "I don't know. The records don't identify them clearly, but they appear to be allies of the ancient Velkari." Zara climbed onto Jake's lap and pressed her small hands against his temples. The mental connection opened again, and Jake found himself experiencing memories that were thousands of years old. He saw the mysterious allies working with Velkari, mind speakers to develop new technologies and solve complex problems. "They're called the Unari," Jake said, the knowledge flowing through him from the ancient memories. They were interdimensional travelers who helped different species develop their telepathic potential. They believed that telepathic abilities were meant to be shared across the galaxy, creating networks of understanding and cooperation. "Interdimensional travelers?" Kate asked skeptically. "That sounds like science fiction." But even as she spoke, Pip began making urgent chittering sounds and pointing toward the library windows. Outside, Jake could see unusual lights moving across the sky. Not like aircraft or natural phenomena, but something else entirely. "Are those your ships?" Thex asked, looking at Jake with concern. "No," Jake said, feeling a growing sense of anticipation, rather than fear. I think they might be the Unari." The lights descended toward the settlement, resolving into elegant spacecraft that seemed to be made of crystalline materials similar to Velkari architecture, but far more advanced. The ships landed gracefully in the settlement's central plaza, and beings began emerging from them. The Unari were tall and slender, with skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Their faces were gentle but alien, with large eyes that seemed to hold vast intelligence and compassion. They moved with fluid grace, and Jake could sense an aura of peaceful intention around them. "Impossible," Thex whispered. "The Unari are legends. They haven't been seen for over 1,000 years." But the Sparklings were reacting with obvious recognition and joy. All three of them were chittering excitedly and tugging at Jake's clothes, trying to get him to come outside. "They want me to meet them," Jake said. "The Unari. I think this is what the Sparklings were trying to warn me about." Not a danger, but an opportunity. Through the library windows, they could see Velkari adults gathering in the plaza, staring at the newcomers with mixtures of wonder and fear. High Matriarch Zephyra and Elder Corvin were approaching the Unari ships, clearly unsure how to respond to this unprecedented situation. One of the Unari, taller than the others and wearing what appeared to be ceremonial robes, stepped forward and began speaking. Even from inside the library, Jake could hear the melodious quality of their voice, though the translation devices were struggling with the alien language. "We must go out there," Jake said, standing up with the sparklings still clinging to him. "I think the Unari came here because of what's happening with Pip, Zara, and Nova. They sensed the awakening of telepathic abilities." "This could be dangerous," Thex warned. "We don't know what they want." But Jake was already moving toward the door, guided by an instinct he didn't fully understand. The sparklings were calm and excited rather than fearful, and their emotions were influencing his own through their mental connection. "I don't think they're here to hurt anyone," Jake said. "I think they're here to help. The question is, are we ready to accept their help?" As they stepped outside into the plaza, Jake felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The choices made in the next few hours could determine the future of both Velkari and human civilization, and somehow 3 small alien children had been the key to bringing them all together. The central plaza of the Velkari settlement had never seen anything like this. 3 elegant Unari spacecraft rested on the crystalline ground like silver flowers, their surfaces reflecting the light of Zerion 7's twin suns. Around them, Velkari. Adults stood in nervous clusters, while their children, the sparklings, pressed forward with obvious excitement and curiosity. Jake walked toward the gathering with Pip, Zara, and Nova still clinging to him. The lead Unari, who wore robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself, turned toward them with what Jake could only describe as a smile of recognition. "Greetings, young awakener," the Unari said, their voice somehow speaking directly into Jake's mind rather than through his ears. "We felt the resonance of renewed connection across the dimensional barriers. You have done something remarkable. Here." High Matriarch Zephyra stepped forward, her scales shifting colors with emotions Jake was learning to recognize as a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "Who are you? What do you want with our world?" "I am Lyrian of the Unari Collective," the tall being replied, this time speaking aloud so the translation devices could function. "We have been watching your species for many centuries, hoping for this day to come." Elder Corvin pushed through the crowd, his dark scales almost black with suspicion and fear. "Watching us? For what purpose?" "To help you reclaim what you lost," Lyrian said gently. 1,000 years ago, your ancestors made a choice born of fear and trauma. They suppressed the telepathic gifts that were meant to be your species' greatest strength. But suppression is not elimination. The abilities have remained dormant, waiting for the right catalyst to awaken them. The sparklings on Jake's shoulders began chittering excitedly, and he felt their emotions flowing through the mental connection they shared. They were trying to tell him something important. "They say you've been waiting for someone like me," Jake said aloud. "Someone whose mind works differently enough to bypass the suppression mechanisms." "Precisely," Lyrian confirmed. "Human neural patterns lack the specific barriers that prevent telepathic development in modern Velkari. Your presence here has created the first opportunity in a millennium for young Velkari to access their full potential." Thex, who had been recording everything with his scientific equipment, stepped forward with obvious excitement. "Does this mean we can restore the telepathic abilities to our entire population?" "Not easily," another Unari warned, approaching the group. This one was smaller and wore simpler robes. "The suppression mechanisms are deeply embedded in current Velkari child-rearing practices. Changing them will require careful work and the cooperation of your entire society." Elder Corvin's voice was sharp with anger. "And what if we choose not to change? What if we prefer our current way of life?" "Then you will continue to decline," Lyrian said sadly. "We have been monitoring your population statistics. Birth rates are falling, intelligence levels in your young are decreasing, and your overall technological development has stagnated. The suppression of telepathic abilities is causing unintended consequences throughout your society." Jake felt a surge of emotion from Pip, and suddenly his mind was filled with images that the Sparkling was sharing. He saw Velkari families struggling with children who seemed less bright than previous generations, scientists unable to make breakthrough discoveries, and a general sense of stagnation that had been growing worse over time. "The Sparklings have been trying to show me this," Jake said. "They can see the problem that the adults can't. The suppression isn't just stopping telepathy, it's limiting all forms of intellectual and creative development." Captain Lisa, who had been watching the proceedings with careful attention, stepped forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked the Unari. "A gradual restoration program," Lyrian explained, "working with willing families to modify child rearing. Practices that would allow young Velkari to develop their natural abilities, starting with the Sparklings who have already shown awakened potential." "Absolutely not," Elder Corvin declared. "We will not risk our children's safety for the sake of alien experiments." But as he spoke, something unexpected happened. Other Sparklings throughout the settlement began gathering in the plaza, drawn by some signal that only they could perceive. They approached Jake fearlessly, their bright scales shimmering with excitement. "Look at them," Dr. Amy Foster said in wonder. "They're not afraid, they're curious and eager." One by one, the young Velkari began climbing on Jake or settling near him. As each Sparkling made contact, Jake felt his mental connection expanding. The combined telepathic resonance grew stronger, and he began to perceive thoughts and emotions from all the young aliens at once. "This is incredible," he said, his voice filled with awe. "They're all connected to each other through me. I can feel what they feel, and they can sense each other's thoughts and emotions." Tony Clark, the engineer from the human team, had been watching with his equipment ready. "The energy readings are off the charts," he reported. "Whatever's happening, here is generating power levels I've never seen before." Emma Wells, the botanist, was studying the effect on the local environment. "The plants around the plaza are responding too," she said excitedly. "They're growing faster and showing more vibrant colors. The telepathic energy seems to be having a positive effect on all life forms." But Elder Corvin was becoming more agitated. "This is exactly what I feared," he said. "Uncontrolled telepathic activity. It could lead to the same disasters that prompted the Great Suppression." "No," said a new voice. It was Nova, the smallest of the three original Sparklings. Her voice was clear and strong as she spoke through the translation device. "Old fears, old pain, not our pain. We choose different path." The other Sparklings began adding their voices, creating a chorus of young alien opinions that had never been heard before in Velkari society. They spoke of dreams and possibilities, of wanting to learn and grow and explore the universe with minds that were free, to develop naturally. They're forming a collective consciousness, Amy observed. Not a hive mind, but a network of individual voices that can work together when needed. Lyrian watched the proceedings with obvious satisfaction. This is how it should be, they said. Young minds learning from each other, growing together, supporting each other's development. This is what your ancestors knew before fear led them astray. Elder Corvin stepped toward the group of sparklings with clear intent to disperse them, but they responded by moving closer together and to Jake. Their combined telepathic presence created a barrier of protective energy that even the adult Velkari could sense. They're protecting themselves, Jake realized, and they're protecting me. They won't let anyone separate us again. This is dangerous, Corvin warned. If the sparklings refuse to obey adult authority, our entire social structure could collapse. Maybe it needs to collapse, said a voice from the crowd. It was a young adult Velkari that Jake didn't recognize. Maybe our social structure is part of what's been holding us back. Other voices began joining in, mostly from younger Velkari who had been watching the events with growing excitement. They spoke of feeling limited and constrained by traditional ways of thinking, of sensing that there was more to life than what they had been taught. A revolution, Thex murmured. The awakening of telepathic abilities is triggering a broader social awakening. High Matriarch Zephyra had been listening to everything with careful attention. Now she spoke with the authority of her position. Elder Corvin, your concerns are noted, but we cannot ignore what we are witnessing. The sparklings are healthier, more intelligent, and more capable when they have access to these abilities. Perhaps it is time to reconsider our ancient choices. And perhaps, Lyrian added gently, it is time to heal the wounds that those choices were meant to protect you from. The Jekti are gone. The war that traumatized your ancestors is over. Your people are free to choose a different path. Jake looked around at the gathering crowd, feeling the combined presence of dozens of young Velkari minds connected through his own. For the first time since arriving on Zerion 7, he felt like he truly understood his purpose here. He wasn't just a scientist studying alien life. He was a bridge between species, a catalyst for change, and a guardian of young minds that deserved the chance to reach their full potential. The question was, would the adult Velkari let that change happen? Or would fear win once again? The warning came without words, flowing directly into Jake's mind through the network of sparklings connected to him. It was a sensation of approaching danger, urgent and unmistakable. The young Velkari around him began chittering anxiously. Their scales shifting to darker colors that Jake had learned indicated fear or alarm. Something's coming, Jake announced to the gathered crowd. The sparklings can sense it. Something dangerous. Lyrian and the other Unari immediately became alert, their graceful forms tensing as they turned their attention to the sky. We sense it too, Lyrian said. A gravitational disturbance approaching the system, large objects moving at high speed. Captain Lisa activated her communication device, trying to contact the Starbound in orbit. This is Captain Morgan to Starbound. Are you detecting any incoming objects? The response crackled through with static and urgency. Captain, we're reading multiple large asteroids on collision course with Zerion 7. Size estimates suggest potential extinction-level impact. ETA approximately 6 hours. A wave of panic rippled through the Velkari crowd. Elder Corvin's expression shifted from suspicion to genuine fear. An asteroid storm? Our planetary defenses weren't designed for multiple large impacts? How many? High Matriarch Zephyra asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "At least 12 objects over a kilometer in diameter," came the reply from orbit. "Current trajectory puts 3 of them on direct impact course with populated areas." Jake felt the sparklings' distress through their mental connection, but underneath the fear was something else: determination and a sense of possibility. Pip climbed higher on his shoulder and pressed tiny hands against his temples. Suddenly, Jake's mind exploded with images and sensations. He saw energy patterns flowing between the sparklings, complex mathematical calculations that his human brain shouldn't have been able to understand, and, most importantly, a solution. "They know how to stop it," Jake said breathlessly. "The sparklings, they can work together to deflect the asteroids, but they need more power than they have." "What kind of power?" Thex asked, his scientific curiosity overriding even the immediate danger. Lyrians stepped forward with understanding in their alien eyes. "Telepathic resonance amplification. The Unari ships are equipped with consciousness enhancement technology. If we can establish a network connection between our systems and the awakened sparklings." "You're talking about using our children as some kind of weapon?" Elder Corvin protested. "Not a weapon," Jake corrected, feeling the sparklings' intentions flowing through him. "A tool for creation and protection. They want to save everyone. Velkari, humans, all life on this planet." Nova hopped down from Jake's arms and ran to the center of the plaza. She began making complex patterns in the crystalline ground with her small claws, creating geometric designs that seemed to pulse with their own energy. Other sparklings quickly joined her, each adding elements to the growing pattern. "It's a focusing array," Emma Wells realized, recognizing the mathematical principles despite the alien execution. "They're creating a physical structure to channel and amplify telepathic energy." Tony Clark was already scanning the construction with his equipment. "The resonance frequencies are incredible. Whatever they're building, it's designed to interface with both Velkari telepathic abilities and the Unari technology." More sparklings were arriving from throughout the settlement, called by some silent summons that only they could perceive. Even young Velkari, who had never shown any telepathic abilities, were participating, their dormant potential awakening under the influence of the growing network. "How do we know this will work?" a Velkari caretaker asked anxiously. "We're risking our children's lives based on untested alien theories." Zara looked up from the focusing array and spoke with startling clarity. "Not untested, remembered. Ancient knowledge, new application. Trust us, please." High Matriarch Zephyra made a decision that would change the course of Velkari history. "We will trust them," she announced. "Prepare the sparklings for whatever they need to do." Lyrian activated devices on their ship, and crystalline structures began emerging from the Unari vessels. The alien technology interfaced seamlessly with the pattern the sparklings had created, forming a complex network of energy conduits and amplification nodes. "Jake," Lyrian said, "you will need to serve as the primary interface between the sparklings and our technology. Your human neural patterns are uniquely suited to bridge different types of consciousness." Jake nodded, feeling both terrified and honored by the responsibility. As he took his position at the center of the focusing array, dozens of sparklings arranged themselves around him in precise patterns. Pip, Zara, and Nova stayed closest to him, their familiar presence providing comfort and confidence. Initiating consciousness enhancement, one of the Unari technicians announced. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Jake felt his awareness expand beyond anything he had ever imagined. Through the network of sparklings, he could perceive the entire solar system, sensing the approaching asteroids as points of destructive potential hurtling toward their world. But more than that, he could feel the collective will of the young Velkari focused on a single goal: protection of all life on Zerion 7. Their combined telepathic power, amplified by Unari technology and channeled through his human consciousness, created something unprecedented. "Energy levels are stabilizing," Tony reported. "Whatever they're doing, it's working." The sparklings began to sing, not with their voices but with their minds. The telepathic harmony they created resonated through the focusing array and up into space itself. Jake felt their intentions flowing through him and outward, reaching across the vast distances between planets. One by one, the asteroids began to change course. The massive space rocks, each capable of devastating entire continents, slowly altered, their trajectories under the influence of precisely applied telepathic force. The sparklings weren't destroying the asteroids. They were gently nudging them into safe orbits where they would become new moons for Zerion 7. "Incredible," breathed Dr. Sam Rodriguez, monitoring the process with his medical equipment. Their brain activity is synchronized across the entire network. They're functioning as a single, distributed consciousness while maintaining their individual personalities. The process took hours of intense concentration. Jake felt the strain of serving as a conduit for such massive energies, but the sparklings supported him, sharing their strength and determination. Adult Velkari throughout the settlement watched in awe as their children accomplished something that no technology or traditional method could have achieved. When it was over, Jake collapsed to his knees, exhausted but triumphant. The sparklings gathered around him, their bright scales shimmering with the satisfaction of a job well done. Above them, the new moons of Zerion 7 hung in the sky like silver jewels, testament to what young minds could accomplish when allowed to reach their full potential. "The immediate crisis is over," Captain Lisa announced after receiving confirmation from the Starbound. "All asteroids have been successfully redirected into stable, non-threatening orbits." Elder Corvin stood in stunned silence for a long moment before speaking. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "I allowed fear to blind me to the true nature of our sparklings' gifts. They are not dangerous. They are miraculous." High Matriarch Zephyra approached Jake with ceremony and reverence. "By the ancient laws of our people, I name you Spark Guardian, Protector, and Guide of the Young Ones. This title has not been used for over 1,000 years, but it is yours by right of deed and bond." Lyrian smiled with alien grace. "The Unari Collective will establish a permanent presence here to help guide the restoration of Velkari telepathic abilities. This world will become a center of learning and growth for both your species and others who seek to develop their consciousness." In the weeks that followed, Jake worked with Thex, the Unari, and other willing Velkari to establish new educational programs. They created environments where sparklings could develop their natural abilities safely, with proper guidance and support. The three who had chosen Jake first, Pip, Zara, and Nova, became the first official ambassadors between young and adult Velkari, helping to bridge the gap between traditional and progressive thinking. The changes weren't always easy. Some adult Velkari struggled to accept the new ways, and there were tensions between those who embraced the restoration and those who preferred the old methods. But the undeniable benefits of allowing sparklings to develop their full potential gradually won over even the most skeptical observers. Human-Velkari relations flourished as both species learned from each other. Jake divided his time between Earth and Zarion 7, serving as a permanent liaison and continuing his role as Spark Guardian. The Sparklings he had bonded with grew into adolescents with unprecedented abilities, becoming leaders and teachers for the next generation. The asteroid crisis had proven something important to both species, that cooperation and understanding could accomplish what no individual effort could achieve. Young minds, freed from the limitations of fear and tradition, could solve problems that had seemed impossible to their elders. And somewhere in the cosmos, other species began to take notice of what was happening on Zarion 7. The Unari Collective sent out messages to their network of allied civilizations, spreading word of a new partnership between humans and Velka.